All right, so the first thing that we're going to do before we start looking at the printing process is mix a little bit of ink. All right, so has to be oil-based, which is a little bit different than anything else that we've used in any of our artworks so far, because the whole process of lithography is based on the idea of water-loving and oil-loving areas on a surface. Right? So if we use water-based inks, we're going to notice that the ink is going to spread. Right? So with the ink, you'll notice that it's fairly stiff, and as I'm going through here, you can see that I'm working the ink back and forth for several minutes in order to try and get the ink to go from a fairly stiff, uh, dull consistency to fairly creamy and a little bit shiny, right? And once that happens, the ink is fairly well developed and it's going to be ready to be applied to the Pronto plate. And in order to do that, we are going to be using a brayer. We have used brayers in the past when we have done linoleum printing. Okay, so before I get the roller out, I'm going to kind of remove as much ink as I can um, from the palette knife there. And unfortunately, I'm sorry that the Pronto plate is not fully in the screen, but I'm going to put it there up near the top as best as I can. And I'm going to wet the surface of the glass and then stick that down, and that's just going to stop the Pronto plate from moving around as I'm applying the ink. Okay. So applying water to the surface, okay, makes sure that the oil-based ink is only going to stick to the black parts of my design. Right? In this case, I've used Sharpie in order to create the illustration of the beetle that you see on the plate. And the water is an extremely important step. Right? And again, the water has a little bit of gum arabic in it in order to help the oil stick to the Sharpie. Right, so you can see me here rolling out the ink. Right? I'm going back and forth in order to try and make sure that the ink is even. Right? It's really, really important that it's not overly goopy, that there's not a ton of texture on the brayer or in the area that I'm rolling out. Right? And there you can see that I've gotten a small little piece of dried material on the brayer. I'm going to remove that in order to make sure that the ink is going to go on consistently onto the Pronto plate. Okay, so once I think I've got it fairly evenly rolled out, I'm going to apply a little bit more water with the gum arabic mixed in, and then I'm going to start to roll it out. And you can see here that when I roll it, the ink is only sticking to the areas that are black. Okay, so I need to charge up the brayer multiple times. Okay, and I'm going to go back and forth in different directions in order to try and get fairly even coverage. Okay, I need to be able to confidently feel like I've got a good thick layer of ink onto the Pronto plate before I actually go through the process of printing it. Okay, so in between, we want to make sure that we're adding some more water, again with the gum arabic, in order to make sure that the ink is going exactly where we want it. Okay, so again, back and forth in different directions, and you can start to see that the black of the design is disappearing under the ink. And again, keep going back and forth. This first time that you're going to do this, you're going to have to charge the plate. Right, it's going to take quite a while in order to get that layer over everything. Okay, so don't be surprised if you have to go back 3, 4, 5 times in order to get the proper coverage. Okay, so once you're satisfied, right, it's going to be time to start to go over and do some of the printing. Okay, so I'm going to carefully move the plate over to the printing press, and ideally you would like to be the only one um, printing at a time, but given that we're in a large class, that's not going to be feasible. If you are doing a multicolored print, you're going to want to perhaps have a plexiglass base that you're doing all of your inking on with the registration guide taped to the underside, so that the plate is always going to be in the exact same spot. Right? If you're just doing a single color like black, right, it's okay to kind of go back and forth. And now you can see me lining up the paper with the paper registration guides on the press bed, and I'm going to cover both the plate and the piece of paper with a with some extra scrap paper, some newsprint or photocopy paper, and we're just going to be using a single piece of craft felt with the pressure on the press basically all the way down, so that you're pushing the paper, the printing paper onto the plate in order to get the ink. And I'm going to be just going back and then forth with my small press here. On larger presses, you may be able to do this in a single pass as well. And once it's gone back all the way, I'm going to carefully move the felt back and then carefully remove the extra paper. And one thing I had forgotten about was to mark the registration on the T-bar. So I'm going to go mark up at the top, at the bottom, and then on the two sides. And this step is particularly important when we are looking at doing multiple colors, so that we can try and make sure that we're lining up the paper in the same spot each time. All right, carefully roll it back, and I've got the first pull. Okay, so that's the basic process of what we're going to be looking at trying to accomplish in terms of printing. And from there, we will continue to run the full edition. Right? So hopefully that will get you guys started, and please make sure that you're asking any additional questions as you are working through this process, as it is quite tricky the first time around. All right, good luck.